Hey there, TMS Derp here. I'm back with another episode of aircraft that should be in War Thunder before the F-117 that are not. This edition will be the first edition of U.S. prototype fighters. These are fighters that were designed with either some interesting engine choices, or we're going against another aircraft that didn't get chosen, unfortunately, or thirdly was just a completely wacky design that didn't end up going into production. So without further ado, let's get on to the three aircraft in this video. First up, we have the XP81. This was the first U.S. aircraft to use both a turbojet and turboprop engine. It was meant to be the next long-range escort fighter after the P-51, a very famous fighter of U.S. Air Force, or technically the U.S. Army Air Corps, during World War II, but this was canceled due to the lack of engines and the end of World War II, and also the emergence of the F/P-80 Shooting Star, the first operational jet fighter in the U.S. Air Force, Army Air Corps. It was kind of an in-between at that point, but only two were ever built of this. Its first flight was in 1945. It was right before the end of World War II. I believe Germany had already surrendered at that point, but Japan was still going on. It had a top speed of 478 miles per hour. That is 769 kilometers an hour. Its armament, it had 6 20mm M3 cannons. This is when the 20 millimeters were starting to get introduced onto U.S. fighters, so it makes sense why it would have 4 or 6 of them. This time it has 6. The interesting part, though, is the power plant. It had a GE T31-GE-3 turboprop with 2300 shaft horsepower instead of regular horsepower, and it also had a GE J33-GE-5 turbojet with 1700 kilograms of force. That would give it a climb rate of a fairly respectable 27 meters a second, especially in 1945. I would say that is pretty good. It almost doubles the ME-262. But for battle rating, I would say, because it's not terribly fast, it's kind of a weird mishmash with 2 different engines, and it's basically a World War II design, late World War II, I would say. I think a battle rating of 6.7 to 7.0 would be perfect for this. It would be right in that sweet spot of facing 262s and just very early jet fighters. And I think it would be kind of a unique and fun aircraft that you could do for a grind event, or even make it to where it could be a squadron vehicle. But that's my thoughts on the XP81. Next up is probably the aircraft that I wish they would introduce most, which would be the XF85 Goblin. This was the smallest fighter ever actually built. It was meant as a B-35/B-36 parasite fighter. The B-35 was the crazy flying wing bomber, and then the B-36, as we know, was one of the largest bombers ever produced, and was right after World War II when it was introduced. But it was never implemented due to issues reconnecting to the bomber, and the fact that a parasite fighter was deemed unnecessary, especially with the rapid evolution of jet engine technology. So 2 were produced. Its first flight was in 1948, which a few years after World War II, but it had a swept wing design, which is very key, especially in an early jet fighter. Its top speed was 664 miles per hour, which is 1,068 kilometers an hour, which is an estimated Mach 0.86, which, especially considering it was a late 1940s aircraft, that is pretty ridiculous, I would say. Its armament, it actually did have an armament. It was 4 50 cal M3 Browning machine guns, which is fairly potent, especially in a little fighter like that. I don't know how many rounds it carried, probably not a tremendous amount considering the size of the aircraft. It was powered by a Westinghouse XJ34-WE-22 turbojet with 1,360 kilograms of force. It's quite a lot of pep in a little tiny buzzer right there. So it gave it a climb rate of a very, very good 64 meters per second. You have to keep in mind this is late 1940s, early 1950s. The Korean War hasn't even started yet. The F-86 doesn't exist. The MiG-15 doesn't exist. This is going against MiG-9s, F-80s, F-84s. So that's very, very good. So because of that, because it has, it's obviously a gunfighter, it's before missiles, and it would obviously be a very agile fighter, with a very, very good climb rate. I was thinking maybe put it at the same bow rating as the ME-163, which is the other little cockroach fighter. Even though that was rocket powered, it's still very similar in philosophy, and that bow rating would be 8.0. I think that would be a nice little bow rating. Obviously, I think this would be a perfect event aircraft, because I think a lot of people would get excited about potentially having the little Goblin flying around trying to terrorize bombers like the B-29, the IL-28s, the Su-14, stuff like that. So that's my thoughts on the XF85 Goblin. The final aircraft for today's video might be the most controversial, because it technically didn't even get into armament phase, but this aircraft is the XF84H Thunder Screech. This was an experimental F-84F, which is the F-84 with swept wings, powered by a turboprop engine. It had two counter-rotating propellers. It was made to test supersonic propellers and responsiveness at jet speeds. It was highly unstable, though, due to the prop speed, which was supersonic, and it had a tremendous amount of torque, so it would pull to the right crazily. It also was nicknamed the Thunder Screech because the speed that the twin props were going made a horrific screeching sound. So two were only made. It was more of a test bed to test the capabilities of turboprop engines, but I still think you might be able to implement this into warthunder in some way. Its first flight was in 1955, so you're thinking mid-1950s. This isn't going to be a speed demon or anything. It's not going against MiG-21s or F-4 Phantoms, F-100 Super Sabres, stuff like that. Its top speed was 520 miles per hour, 837 kilometers an hour. Not tremendously fast, but it wasn't meant to be tremendously fast in the first place. The armament is kind of where it possibly falls apart, because it technically was never implemented with guns or missiles. So I was thinking just going off of the F-84F, you'd be able to put 4 20mm M3 cannons on it, or if you're lucky, maybe 2 AM9B sidewinders, because it did end up coming, because sidewinders were just coming into their own in the mid 1950s to the late 1950s. The power plant was an Allison XT40-A-1 turboprop engine making 5,850 horsepower, and it actually came with an afterburner as well that made 7,230 horsepower, but was never actually used. Its climb rate was a pedestrian 25 meters a second. So because of it not being tremendously fast and not having a very good climb rate, as well as the armaments not being fantastic depending on what you would want to put into it, the barrel rating I think would be fine at like 7.3 to 7.7, mainly because, like I said, it's just not very fast. It would be very big and very heavy, and the armaments are nothing to really sneeze at. Well, you could probably sneeze at them, but it wouldn't result in much. But that's all I have for this video. Thank you everyone for watching. If you like what you see and you haven't already, consider subscribing and liking the video. Next, I think I'm probably going to start with the US bombers, because there is quite a few that I can go over. I just wanted to do some of the prototypes that I thought would be fun. Even with the Thunder Screech, it could be a bit of an asterisk, but I think it would still be fun to maybe implement it, and because of its ridiculous noise. But if there's any aircraft that you'd like to see me cover, leave a comment down below, and that's it. So until next time, have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Peace out.